Hi, this is Rick Anthony, and welcome to the Someone You Should Know podcast, the podcast that spotlights the stars of yesterday, today, and tomorrow. So sit back, relax, have a cold one, and get ready to meet someone you should know. And I can honestly tell you that ever since I got this one booked, I have been excited because this person I have talked to on 3 previous occasions, his band basically does the equivalent of Santa Claus delivering all the presents in one night. He and the members of his legendary band will perform, get this, 100-plus concerts in 60 cities in just over 45 days. How do they do that? We're going to find out here because today's guest is from the amazing Trans-Siberian Orchestra. It's my friend Al Pitrelli. Al, welcome back.
Thank you so much for having me back, my friend. How are you?
I am very well. I'm so glad to have you back on the show. When I mentioned the fact that your band does all those many gigs in a very short period of time, listeners, the number one question is, how do they do that? But I know one of the clues that you have is the fact that you clone the band. Half of it goes east, half of the band goes west of the Mississippi. That helps out cut out a portion of the acts and such and the dates. But it's more than that, isn't it?
Well, yeah. I mean, the long and the short of it is, back in I think '99, we did our first run of dates, and it was 7 or 8 cities. It was brand new to the world. Everybody was buying the records, but the live performance hadn't been done yet. So I think we did like Boston, Philly, New York, Detroit, Chicago, a bunch of shows in Cleveland. And they went over so well, the promoters from all over America wanted dates. And, the gentleman who created this whole thing, Paul O'Neill, was like, listen, I don't know how we're going to get from Boston to Seattle to San Antonio to St. Louis. So Bob Kinkle at the time was the musical director. He became the musical director of the East Coast Band, which primarily concentrates in what I call the 13 colonies. And then he looked at me and he goes, you get everything else. Okay. So, it started out kind of east and west, but it ended up, dividing up the country like that. So, it grew up over the years, though, my friend. You got to understand, this isn't something that, like, all of a sudden, there was 2 monsters bands and each one had, like 20 tractor trailers and 12 buses. Over, the last 24 or so, 23 years of touring, it grew from one 24-foot box truck and a bus to where we are right now. And like you had said, it's about 100 shows in 45 days. I'm just so grateful because, the folks, the community that's embraced TSO has just demanded more shows, and we'll do as many as we physically can.
Absolutely, and physically can is another thing because being a member of the band, you've got to be physically fit because you're performing every single night. I was thinking, Al, that you and the crew needs to get together and basically market the TSO tour workout. That would definitely definitely
no joke.
And the thing is, there's so much energy on the stage. With the exception of the time I saw you with a broken arm. It was a broken arm or leg. I think you had a broken leg that year.
Broken leg.
Yeah.
Yeah, broken leg.
I remember that.
Oops.
That was so good.
No, well, you got to understand, listen, one thing is that everybody in the organization, folks on stage, folks under the stage, folks in the office, the O'Neill family, everybody has dreamt a version of this since we were all little kids, Now, I just turned 60 years old, so when I saw the Beatles in 1964 on the Ed Sullivan Show, I was 2 years old in my feety pajamas, and that was it for me. I didn't want anything to do with anything else in my life. I just wanted to play guitar. I wanted to be like Paul McCartney, John Lennon, or George Harrison, whatever. So the fact that we have the opportunity for all these years to stand downstage and perform 2 shows a day, that's an adrenaline rush and an energy that you can't really describe. So, I immediately turn into a 14 or 15-year-old every time I put that Les Paul around my neck and I look out in the audience and I see fists in the air. It's awesome.
That's got to be quite a rush. One of the first songs that we're going to feature on the show today is actually one of the most downloaded Christmas songs of all time. Would you believe it's 7th on the most downloaded Christmas song list? And it is one that I know you know. It is Christmas Eve, Sarajevo, 12/24. I'll never forget the first time I heard it. What are your thoughts on it?
When Paul had that idea, it was winter 1995. And I had known Paul for about 10 years already at that point. And I had met him in the middle 80s. And, he's a great dude, great producer, songwriter. And he's like, hey, we got to work together one day. I was like, all right, cool. And I went about cutting my teeth and getting my act together. And he called me winter 95. And he said, listen, I got this idea. Would you mind coming into the studio? I need kind of almost an underscoring, not necessarily guitar stuff, but I need you, because he knew I was Alice Cooper's music director, and I was pretty familiar with, like, theatrical presentations of songs. So I went in and he put the faders up, and I looked at him kind of a little cockeyed, and I was like, "What's with the Christmas song, dude?" And he goes, and he laughed. And he goes, "Well, it's not really a Christmas song. It's a soundtrack depicting events that took place on Christmas Eve during the war in Sarajevo." And I was like, "Okay, you got my attention." And he explained the story to me, and as he was explaining the story, which basically there was a classical musician who would grab his cello and go down to the town square and play pieces by the great composers in protest to the bombing raids. And the hair on my arm started standing up, because when I was playing with Cooper, we played what was Zagreb and Belgrade, and I was in that town square.
Uh-huh.
And I said, "Press record," and I started playing the opening notes that you hear on that song, and he looked at me and goes, "That's it." Now, at the end of that, he bought me a cheeseburger and sent me on my merry way. Because, who would have thought that you and I would be having this conversation, what's going to be almost 28 years this coming winter.
All right. We're going to play that song next right now in the Someone You Should Know podcast. It is Christmas Eve, Sarajevo, 1224. That, of course, is Christmas Eve, Sarajevo, 1224 from the legendary Trans-Siberian Orchestra, and I'm honored to have my dear friend Al Pitrelli back on the show. Your concerts are listed basically as a Christmas rock opera. Would you consider that a proper moniker?
It's kind of trying to describe a lightning storm when you're standing in the middle of a cornfield, I never really knew how to describe it other than if you watch a thunderstorm on TV, it's cool, but if you happen to be, like, obviously safely, in the midst of it, it's like, this is over-the-top ridiculous. You just can't even begin to explain what TSO has become over the years. So, again, going back to '99, our first tour, we had, one truck and a fog machine, and we thought we were awesome then,
Yeah.
And then you fast forward, and again, I think it was last year we had, 20 or 21 tractor trailers, 12 buses, 85 people on the crew, lasers, pyro, moving trusses, hydraulic lifts, video screens, an incredible rock band, orchestra. And at the center of it is just this beautifully written, very Frank Capra-esque story that Paul, put pen to paper so many years ago. Yeah. And I think one of the more important things, we can talk about how bombastic this show is.
It's
because
wild.
It is. It's all that, dude. It's like the Great American Arena Rock Show.
This particular... yeah, go ahead.
But at the center of it is this story about missing someone, in the case of Ghost of Christmas Eve, we're going to perform in its entirety this year, it's basically like a teenage runaway young girl finds shelter in this old abandoned theater, and she just wants to find a way home, and her parents are flipping out. They don't know what she ran away for, what the fight was about. They just want their baby girl home. And what I realized is that everybody in the audience and on stage and under the stage relates to the story because everybody misses somebody, especially around Christmas. I always try to tell people, look, man, everybody's got an empty chair at their dining room table, and it becomes much more apparent and obvious that we miss that person so much more, especially around the holidays. And I think people insert their situation into Paul's story, and the story becomes about them.
Right. And matter of fact, one of the songs that I'd like to feature next is, I think, one of my favorite TSO songs. And it's had me ever since the first time I heard Tommy Farisi singing it. This Christmas Day is what we're going to feature next on the Someone You Should Know podcast.
So tell me, Christmas, are we wise to believe in things we never see? Are prayers just wishes in disguise? And are these wishes being granted me? For now I see Christmas Day. So tell me, Christmas, are we kind? More this day than any other day? Or is it only in our minds? And must it leave when you have gone away? It's different now, it's changed somehow, and now you're here to stay. She's coming home this Christmas Day. The world that doesn't seem the same in a single night. You know it all has changed. Everything is now as it should be. I had the ornament, I had the perfect tree, I had a string of lights, I had a chance to see everything that my heart thought could be. For all the dreams, you were the first I knew, and every other one was a charade of you. You stayed close when I was far away. And in the darkest night, you always were the star who always took us in, no matter who we are. So she's coming home this Christmas Day.
That is one of my personal favorites from Trans-Siberian Orchestra, This Christmas Day.
Great song.
I love that. Also, you and, whatever, Bart Shadow singing Old City Bar. I love that. Yeah. Just you and him. And, of course, his can of Lysol.
And again, so you just nailed it. The dynamics of the show take you, it's like a roller coaster emotionally, lyrically, visually, and musically. So we have things like, a Beethoven symphony or a Mozart piece, yet we'll kind of take it down because of Paul's story and the way the story is written to just an acoustic guitar and solo vocal. And you could hear a pin drop in an arena.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
It's crazy.
Al, I have to share one moment from you. I've seen TSO like 5 or 6 times. My favorite moment happened to be early in the TSO realm. Fox Theater, St. Louis. My wife and I were guests of Paul. He got us front row center seats, and right next to us were these 2 little old ladies. And I think they might have thought that Trans-Siberian Orchestra might have been a Russian orchestra playing the Nutcracker. But as soon as you guys launched into the very first track, they realized it wasn't, and they got up and left.
Oops.
So Chris Caffrey jumped from the stage, landed on those 2 vacant seats right next to my wife, and just played for like 2 songs. It was just phenomenal. That is one of my favorite TSO memories.
Oh, my God. I can't tell you how many times that we've... talking about the audience maybe being a little bit surprised. I can't tell you how many times I've been downstage center being surprised looking at the audience. Opening night, Tower Theater, Philadelphia, 1999. I look down, the lights go down, this curtain comes up, fog's rolling off the stage, and I look down in front of me is like this older couple, like you had just said, and they have those like crocheted reindeer sweaters on. And I'm like, all right, cool. And then right next to them was a dude wearing a Slayer hoodie. And I was like, ooh, this might go one of 2 ways. But you always have the opportunity of, pissing like half the audience off. You never know which way it's going to fly.
Absolutely.
But at the end of that show, dude, everybody had a fist in the air, standing ovation. If you're a fan of any genre of music, you're going to enjoy yourself with us. If you're a fan of Broadway and theatrical presentations, you're going to love this. If you're a fan of great storytelling, you're going to love it. If you're a fan of arena rock, you're absolutely going to love it. It's the biggest show on God's earth. So every so often people kind of like, well, you speak really good English. I'm like, huh? Well, like you said, they think I'm from Siberia. I'm like, nah, Brooklyn.
Now, you do have a couple of foreign cast members, and your keyboardist. He's from Russia, right? One of your keyboardists.
Ukraine, as a matter
Ukraine,
of fact. Yeah, Vitaly's, from Ukraine.
I thought so. One of the cool things that Trans-Siberian does at every concert is they give back to the community. They give at least $1 from every ticket sold to local charities. To date, I have notes here, $18 million already. That is amazing.
Well, that's the O'Neill family, though, brother. That's who they are as people. I mean, incredibly generous, loving, caring people. And, from the jump, they wanted to make a difference in the world. And I think, albeit $1 at a time, people are like, oh, $1's not going to make a difference. Yeah, but when you do it for a lot of years and consistently, it adds up to, like you had just said, a substantial amount of money. And, Paul, his wife, his daughter, they've just always wanted to change the world. I think they're accomplishing that.
Awesome. Very good. Your tour kicks off November 16th, the Reach Center in Green Bay, and also the Mid-America Center in Council Bluffs, Iowa. Get your tickets now. Like I've said before, and I'll say it again, they make great Christmas gifts.
Good stocking stuffers.
Any final thoughts, Al?
No, my brother, I always enjoy our time together. I wish you and your family a really happy and safe holidays, and I can't wait to get back at it. It's going to be an incredible year.
Absolutely. I know you guys are going to do, and guys and gals are going to do a fabulous job, as you always have. Anyone has asked me what is my favorite concert, TSO always tops the list, and they say why.
That means so much.
It's a Christmas show. It's more than a Christmas show. You've got, like you said, you've got a storyline. You've got pyro. Mm-hmm. You've got great musicianship. And there's no stage tracks and such here. This is all great musicians. And I think
live rock and roll.
I think the only question is, what do you do after the final show on New Year's Eve or around that time frame? Do you guys take some time off, or is it back to it?
Like a week or two off, everybody goes home, spends time with their families, and then, we got to get ready for the following year's tour. It's a full-time, year-round job. It never ends. Listen, I'm proud of it. It's grown up to something that exceeded all my expectations, so I couldn't be prouder.
Awesome. Al Pitrelli's my guest today on the Someone You Should Know podcast. We're going to wrap up the show with a song that you hear in your neighborhood on lights displays, and you've heard it on TV. Wizards in Winter, wrapping up the show here on the Someone You Should Know podcast. Thanks again, Al.
Always, my brother. You stay safe.
Hi, this is Rick Anthony, thanking you again for listening to this episode of Someone You Should Know. Now, if you're an aspiring musician or an established musician that's looking for a little exposure, I invite you to drop us a line at someoneyoushouldknowpodcast@gmail.com. That's someoneyoushouldknowpodcast@gmail.com. Also, I invite you to tell a friend about the Someone You Should Know podcast. I thank you for tuning in this time, and I invite you to check us out next time on the Someone You Should Know podcast, because you never know who's going to show up. Until next time, remember, God loves you, and so do I.